everyone, welcome to Sway Bay Anime. Other than that, let's begin. So I guess like we're gonna start and I'm gonna talk about the worst generation. As some of you may know, I'm an activist by day and a nerd at night. And so today I'm going to be filming on my phone, so it's gonna be a little bit up close because I got weird backlight back here where it looks kind of weird from far away. So I'm just gonna do it up closer so you guys can see my face, right? In addition to that, I'm gonna get right into it. So are we the worst generation? Well, I love One Piece. Some of you may know I love One Piece. I have One Piece on my channel all the time. And I try to in some way of fashion. And I would say this. Are we the worst generation? I feel like as an activist, I feel like every activist generation feels like the worst generation, right? Like everyone always makes us feel like, oh my gosh, like you guys are ruining this generation and stuff like that. But I think that the thing that prompted me the most to figure out and to think about, are we the worst generation, is that so many parallels between activism and or like, liberation that's happening in 2022 and the One Piece universe. Right? So in the One Piece universe, for those who don't know, like a lot of, Luffy is more like a libertarian. I wouldn't say he's like a social justice warrior or someone that cares about like, certain things, but he does have like the basic like things of like caring about people or caring about his community or caring about people he knows and don't knows and like wanting people to have the basic rights of liberty and justice and etc. Right? But I would say that in the show, it's like the world government always refers to Luffy and the crew as the worst generation, right? So they have like these lists of young people, which you saw in my thumbnail, which was a list of young people who are supposed to add up into the worst generation, right? So these are supposed to be the worst generation of pirates yet. These are the hardest generation ever because they're the strongest groups of pirates at such a young age, and they're like pillaging and they're doing all this stuff that the world government is like a little bit along with the propaganda. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, and they're just doing all this stuff, right? And so when I was watching the video or watching One Piece in general, and like I'm on episode 837. So like when I was watching One Piece and I was like remembering and looking back at like how they consistently refer to them as the worst generation, I realized that like I am a part of that. I feel like I realized that like what my work that I do is, hold on right quick. I feel like there's a weird thing happening in the background. Okay, hopefully y'all weren't able to hear that, but I had to just pause right quick. But I feel that like I can relate to being part of the worst generation. And it's not because of that, but I feel like as an activist, like we do so much work in the community. We talk to people, we do this, and we often going up against a lot of people with a lot of power, basically. And they come in and they're like, people with power tell us like, no, they tell us XYZ, and we have to push back on that. And then we are often seen as like the worst generation, like our generation didn't do that. Why are you guys so sensitive? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, And I think that that's like something that like I feel like so much. And then like I feel like when I was watching One Piece, I'm like, I felt like I related to that. Like I'm a part of the worst generation, and it's something like a infamous thing too, with being like worst generation. Yes, like I want a shirt that says worst generation, and it's not because necessarily it's something we are technically the worst generation as like millennials or xennials, but I feel like I want to say worst generation in the sense of like we're so like the previous generation was so good at like maybe racial propaganda, homophobia, queerphobia, sexism, etc. And then this generation right here, even though all of us have not had our ducks in a row, all of us are not doing like excellent work, and all of us not on the same page. But this generation here, these two generations, Xennials and Millennials, we're the worst generation because of the work we're doing, the conversations we're having, all this other stuff. We're not performing as well when it comes to the propaganda, and as well as when it comes to like, the metrics of performing oppression towards one another as our previous generations. And so I'm like, yes, I'm part of the worst generation on that. Like we're terrible at doing that. Not saying millennials and xennials aren't racist, because I have a strong belief that everyone's racist, everyone's sexist, everyone's homophobic. It's all about like how much you have in you, how much you're willing to unlearn, how much you are like, trying to figure out how to like, respect people's bodies and minds and spirits, right? And it's also a process that some things you may not be as racist on as another person, and sometimes some things you may be more racist on than another person. And it's like balancing those things out and trying to lower those understandings of like how you appear and how you, work with race, right? And I know someone's like, you social justice warrior, like, why are you talking about this? But again, I watch One Piece a lot, and I like learn a lot of stuff about like activism. Like Luffy, the way he is able to organize people to come in to do and dismantle like oppressive, systematic like issues is amazing. Like he comes in and literally be like, hey, we're gonna do this, and people really doubt him at first. It's like, it's you gonna tell us to do this, and he comes in and he shows how much power he has, and he's able to dismantle things that people didn't even think he was able to do. And he's not only doing it by himself, he's able to do collective people power, which is one of the things that's so important when doing community organizing, is developing people power, right? And I think that is something that is amazing that I see in One Piece, where I'm like, oh, that parallels to my job. Because there's not many shows that talk about community organizing or talk about activism. And again, not saying Luffy is either or, like a community organizer or activist, but the way he's able to collectively build up people power, the way he's able to talk to people, the way he's able to build up communities, as well as like help people be a part of his mission, which is become king of the pirates, is very, very amazing and interesting. And it reminds me of how much I know people who do similar work to me do in their communities, when they're building up folks, when they're building out communities, when they're having these conversations, when they're dismantling governments, when they're going in for war. Like, I think that like one of the things that stuff like you can tell like the difference too, like a lot of stuff is battles, right? When you do organizing, right? And I'm not talking about people doing like extreme stuff. I'm talking about more like battles in the sense of like social, cultural battles that we're having every day, online, in person, in our government, in our policies, personally in our neighborhoods, right? And I think that that's something that I feel like One Piece touches on in a slight way too, even when we talk about like Sky Island, and we talk about how like those folks over there were like, their land was taken away, and like a lot of folks were like, you know, oppressed in Sky Island, right? Like it resembled the Native Americans and how they were oppressed and how their land was taken away, right? We even have hints of like activism when we talk about Fish Island, right? Where fish people weren't able to use like non-fish people blood, right? And then like they had to literally find other sources of blood, because it was illegal to even do blood transfusion for that, which is resemblance of the civil rights movement, and also segregation that was happening in the United States as well as globally around the world, where Black Americans and also other POCs could not do blood transfusions with white Americans because we were not seen as equals, right? They even had the Fishman Island doing slavery and like being enslaved, right? And how that was also something that Luffy was trying to fight for the liberation of them being free in that matter, and how fucked up that was, and encouraging the people, and also wanting to protect them as well, knowing that history, even though he was himself insensitive to those folks, right? Again, this inherentness of like, we're all these things, that we all embody these systems, but we have to like work on ourselves in order to deconstruct these systems. And I feel like Luffy has worked on himself in the sense of deconstructing these systems to a certain extent, because Luffy's still problematic. Like in the sense of like personal, like in his world, yeah, he's pretty cool, but like if you met him in real life, I'm pretty sure he's like, wow, why are your skin so dark? Like I feel like that would be a question, right? But that's because like, I mean, even though there is Black people in One Piece, I could see him asking that in general because Luffy's kind of dense. But I do think that like the fact that he has a passion and a love and a care for people, and regardless of his ignorance, he's going out into these different islands, different communities, and different spaces, and trying to liberate the people, but also empower them to liberate themselves. And I think that's one of the things that happened with Fishman Island, one thing that happened to Skypiea, another thing that happens with any like people that Luffy come into contact with, is that he's like, hey, you need to fight for yourself. You need to find that in you to fight for you. You need to be fighting for yourself and fighting for your liberation, because I can free this island, but if you can't fight for you, you won't stay free, right? And I think that that's something that's really important with the work that Luffy is doing in those like spaces and in those things. And I think that like also one thing I really loved about the character is that he says that, but also he will protect, he will defend. If he knows you're trying your best, he will come in to defend and protect. Even if you are weaker, he will come in to defend and protect. But he's like, I can't be the key to your liberation. You're the key to your own liberation. And I think that that's something that we can take from One Piece. And that's why I feel like I relate to being the worst generation, because I feel like so many people in my generation, including myself, that do activism work, we believe that we're all the key to our own liberation. We're all the key to each other's liberation. And we all have to work together in order to get some type of liberation together, whether there's freedom from white supremacy, whether it's freedom from like XYZ, any systems that may oppress oneself, right? And I think that that's like those things. It's like, how are we getting free? How are we building with one another to get this freedom? And I think that that's something that I run to reflect with. And that's something I wanted to share with today too, being, are we part of the worst generation? I want to say yes. I feel like I'm proud to be part of the worst generation. So yes, buy the shirts. I don't have a shirt to give, but look up online, make it on Canva, worst generation, pride. Yes. Okay. Other than that, this has been Sway Bay and Anime. Peace.